We believe that the heart of a man is a treasure trove of untold stories, powerful lessons, and profound wisdom. Through authentic dialogues and insightful discussions, we aim to unlock these treasures, one story at a time. So, whether you're seeking guidance, inspiration, or simply a moment of reflection, you're in the right place. Get ready to be challenged, inspired, and transformed. And now, to guide you through this journey of discovery, please welcome your host, a visionary leader and a true catalyst for change, Rewire, but we affectionately know him as the Mindset Coach.
You're muted, bro.
Thank you. Good evening. I apologize. Welcome to tonight's show. The conversation tonight is the freedom paradox. It's going. I feel like it's going to be a good show. As you know, I am your host for tonight, Tawami Gaddy, son of Timothy, also known as the Available Man, joined by my big brother right here on my side. We know him as, we just call him Coach, but Dwayne Rewire, also known as the Mindset Coach. How are you doing this evening, bro?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Been a very light week for me. I enjoy every bit of it as well. But of course, I always look forward to our Friday night conversations. So yeah, all is well. How about you?
Man, same here. It wasn't a bad week. Things seem to be slowing down a little bit at work, but there's a pickup on the horizon. So, but I enjoy the slow weeks, and like every week, I enjoy my Fridays, getting here to talk with you and the rest of the bros. Looks like it's the two of us this evening, and we know how to do our thing.
It's the two of us. I'm my bad.
Hey, nah, I'm always down for a song pause, and I'm sorry. Pause for cause right there.
That's it.
Oh man. But with that said, let us get into the show tonight. Let us get started. So today we'll be talking about the freedom paradox. Many people enjoy the conversation of freedom, right? We call ourselves here in the United States the land of the free. As Christians, we called ourselves free in Christ. We use this term freedom very loosely. I would say loosely, and only because my question is, do we really have understanding of freedom? And so with that said, we're going to get into some definitions of this idea of freedom and the freedom paradox. So first, I want to start by talking about defining the term paradox. All right, a paradox is a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that, when investigated or explained, may prove to be well-founded or true. All right, keep that in mind. Now, the definition of freedom is the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. So these two definitions and these two ideas in mind, how do we bring it together? So what is the paradox of freedom? So the paradox is if the lack of restraint is the idea of freedom, then the contradiction would be constraint. The idea is that freedom is not free, but it is to be free from chaos, confusion, and lawlessness, I would even say, which are the byproducts of order and restriction. So many will make statements such as, They have freedom in Christ, or free to do as they will. Right? I believe that that's what keeps us from the idea of law and order, or the order of God. So with that freedom leads us to the idea of lawlessness, conformity, and practices such as today's practices that many will be celebrating, that we do not have full understanding of. And so without law, without order, there's freedom but confusion. All right. With that said, let us get into this conversation tonight. So first off, bro, those definitions, how do you, if we can kind of bring them up back and forth, how do you feel about those definitions? Is there anything that you want to add, uh, take away?
I am okay with this definition. I kind of squint at the notion of seemingly absurd um, portion of it, if you will. Um, Contradictory, sure, kind of like the statement of less is more. Less is more is a paradox. So it's two contradictory assertions put together to kind of prove a point. And of course, when you look at it, it does prove itself to be true. So outside of a seemingly absurd assertion, yeah, I'm okay with this one.
Yeah, I I felt the same way originally, but then I thought about the idea of the word absurd. Is not that it is absurd, but on 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 its face value may sound absurd. So you talk about freedom and then we talk about restraint. People are, oh, the two don't match. It can be absurd, uh, in thought
Sure,
until it's explained. So that's how I thought about it.
sure.
Um, and then the definition of freedom.
Yeah, I'm good with this.
All right, I like it. I like it. I like it. So with that said, if the opposite of freedom, or the paradox of such thing, would be the addition of restraint or constraint, what comes to your mind when you hear that term or that word?
Mm, um, so I'm assuming you're asking about the paradox as it is written. If the lack of restraint is the idea of freedom, then the contradiction would be constraint.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it's so that's kind of like one. The jury's still out on that one, right? Because it is making a statement in the beginning. If we can agree to this, then we can assume this, and I don't think collectively we will agree to the first portion of it, um, because ideally, um, assuming that the lack of restraint is the idea of freedom. I think in some people's mind, that's maybe how they see it. But to me, I don't see it that way. And this is given somebody who spent 24 years in the army, right? Understanding that there are rules and regulations that govern being in a system that governed itself by a code of ethics, and those code of ethics define behavior, and as long as the behavior was consistent with the code of ethics, then you did not have to worry about the arm of the law, if you will. So I would not necessarily say the lack of restraint is the idea of freedom, nor would I even conclude that the contradiction would be constraint. I think constraint is the necessity for freedom to exist. And I think from there, that kind of opens the aperture for us to better understand what freedom looks like.
I like that. I also so here's the reason why I like it, right? Is because it, to me, it's the full understanding of what the paradox is,
Sure.
right? So to make the statement that constraint is the necessity for freedom is in and of itself is the paradox to me, right? Because when we look at freedom, or even just defining freedom, can we bring that definition up again? All right, the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. Well, then who's free? Because if I have this and I don't have any hindrance or restraint to it, technically I might be the only one free, because now it begins to impede.
Well, so I see where I see what you're saying. I see where you're going. However, I don't want to confuse the power or right to do a thing with me actually doing a thing. Like I've always said, just because we have the freedom of speech does not necessarily mean that we should freely speak. Now, when we get to the point of not necessarily freely speaking, that is me exercising restraint. But again, exercising restraint and having the power to do so without restraint is not the exact same thing. So when I look at the pure definition of freedom, sure, that's the thing. It exists. You have the ability to have the free you have the ability to freely speak. But when you mature, you realize that you may not necessarily want to say everything that comes to your mind.
I agree. So with that said, right, actually brings me to my next question. And so if one does have the ability to exercise absolute freedom without self-restraint or thought, how can it then infringe on another one person's freedom?
So when we look at the notion of absolute, I don't believe that there's any such thing as absolute, to be honest with you, especially when it comes down to mankind. So when we look at the notion of absolute freedom within man, it will, without a doubt, infringe on somebody else's. I won't even say infringe on somebody else's freedom, but I will say it will infringe on boundaries that they may have established for themselves. And then within the scope of that, now that's when you start having issues, and that's when chaos starts to come about, because at some point that person is going to defend their boundaries. And then if I am under the mindset that I have absolute freedom, them defending their boundary is also, kind of goes against my perspective of absolute freedom. So again, that's why I say I don't believe in mankind there is absolutely nothing but one thing, and that's dependent upon the Most High. So in this question, how can one's freedom infringe upon another's? If absolute, easily, because it does not consider civil order, and it does not consider collaboration. It does not consider how we are supposed to work together when it comes down to this thing that we call life. And at the end of the day, it only looks at myself.
Really, bro, it's hard, because like there's no rebuttal really, because you hitting it. His divine, she put up in the comments something that I was thinking as well. She said, agreed. As a believer, the Bible gives me my limitations or my constraints, right? And as we actually examine what the scriptures teaches, right, it teaches us how to be. And I love Lisa Keys for always reminding us of the communicative aspect of our walk, of the unity aspect of our walk. Well, the only way, and look, right on time. I believe the kingdom requires unity, right? And she reminds us of this all the time. Well, that's what the constraints were meant for. The limitations were meant so that we don't infringe on each other's ability to exist. If I'm not, and that's why when I hear that word absolute, I'm thinking like, so if I believe that I have the ability to speak when I want to speak and say what I want to say at all times without thought of anyone else or their feelings, to what I'm telling you, is that your silence is necessary for my ability to speak, which means you lose your right to exist in my space. That and absolutely that's contradictory to what the scriptures teach us if we say we are believers.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think when we look at, and I'd kind of, for anybody who is out there and hearing this and they may seem a little confused with the notion of constraint and restraint, I always look at it as constraint is something external and restraint is internal. Now, can I use the term restraints for something that prevents me from doing? Absolutely. Right. I can put, y'all know them bracelets, those little iron bracelets, right? Those are considered to be restraints, right? Considered to be restraints. But ideally, restraint is something that I do from internally. So if constraints exist, i.e., the law, and you look at it like you are raised in, whatever state, city, or whatever you're in, and you're taught to obey the law. Ideally, as you get older, what ends up happening is that you don't have to worry about breaking the law because it's a part of your upbringing. Now, instead of the constraints restricting you, it is the internal restraints that you have to where you do not violate those constraints. And I think when we look at it from that perspective, that kind of changes the context of everything. So I just want to kind of add to what you were actually saying.
Agreed. Agreed. Oh man, look, they already added in the chat. I'm loving it. Well, can we bring up Nick D's statement real quick, and then Lisa's question after that? She made a statement. Yes. Thinking freedom being absolute is an unrealistic frame of mind. No man is meant to exist alone and without law, which is, I believe, is what you were explaining in the beginning. Like I said, I have no pushback to it. And of course, now when I'm framing these questions and I'm framing these statements, and this is for the chat, I know my brother understands this. I'm going to the extreme on purpose, because I believe if we look at our society, especially we so hyper political now on everything, there's a group of people who are trying to live in this extreme concept of freedom, of absolute. I do what I want. I be what I want. I say what I want. I'm at some point, we have to stop defending the idea of restricting others. This is where cancel culture comes from. I'm canceling you because you hurt my feelings, and I have your freedom. If you have the freedom to say that you a cat, dog, monkey, I have the freedom to say that you're crazy. It's like, what are we doing? So now you silence me because I said you're crazy, but then you have the right. Your freedom of speech allows you to say that you're these things. Well, my freedom of speech should be able to combat it. Am I wrong?
No, I mean that is a way of looking at it. But then the other side of it is that I exercise restraint, and I just don't care what you call yourself. You can call yourself whatever you want to call. That's not my business. I don't get into all that. You can be whoever you want to be. If you think you're a bird and you jump on top of the house and want to jump off and believe you can fly, good luck. Have at it.
Just give me time to put my phone out first.
Yeah. If at first you don't succeed, try again.
Right. And we had a question up there. Yes, tackle this one first for me. Should we all speak the same language?
Yes. That's my initial response. I think we all have to speak the same language if we're going to live up under a universal law or under a universal system. But then part of the struggle is kind of going back to what you were just saying, Gaddy. Who is going to interpret that language when the language is so robust that the common man don't understand it? That's where we find ourselves at a lot. And then a lot of times what we also see is that there are certain amendments. So once you understand what that language looks like, then that gets amended, and then that gets amended. And for what reason is always a great question. So yes, initially we all should speak a same language if we exist under the rule of a common law, and everybody should understand that language so that we can understand how to exercise civility as it pertains to each one of us. So the answer to this question for me is yes.
Yes. Well, thank you, Lisa, for the clarity.
Oh, I know what she was talking about.
Yeah, I could tell by your answer, because my answer was going to be slightly opposite. So thank you for that clarity, because what I was going to say was we should speak the same thing. But language, so I have an unpopular opinion, right? One, if I stay in the carnal for 10 seconds, I believe understanding languages is important to understanding culture, which allows me to understand the beauty of a people and of their history, right? Because the language tells you a lot, which is why a lot of times, when we dive deep biblically, I tend to go into the Hebrew, even the ancient Hebrew, because I believe language is attached to culture. That's one. And then my unpopular part of this of that statement, and I know that this is not what you mean, at least because you did clarify that. But I always go back to Babel. One of the ways that the father combated, what's the word I'm looking for? Not disobedience, but rebellion, was to separate the language of the people. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, even with that, he still causes us to speak the same thing, to say the same thing. And so that's the way I was thinking about it. Right? But with the clarity of what she's saying, absolutely. I agree. I think we should be saying the same. I think me and you had a conversation about this. There's no separation.
Right.
You're my brother, Rose my brother, our brother Andy, Unc, and you do a Bible study. I do a Bible study. Roland does a Bible study. But when we come together, we should reason and go back to where we're teaching and say the same thing.
Yeah. So to that point, and I'm glad you said it the way you said it. Like, if I want to understand the culture, then I need to understand the language. Well, it's the law, the unified law, that defines the culture. So if I want to be a part of that culture, then I have to abide by that law. That's the thing. So even in the midst of me abiding by the law that defines that culture, now what ends up happening is that I fall right in with the culture. And even if I don't understand the language, I can learn that particular language. So eventually we get to the point to where we're speaking a common language, because at some point we're still going to have to communicate. It's just like when I was in Korea. Sure, we can go to Korea, and like I told you guys, I think I said it on Coach's Corner. My first time going to Korea, I was getting kind of frustrated because they didn't speak English. Like, make that make sense. I'm on their land, getting mad at them because they didn't speak English, right? But then, once I kind of humbled myself, and with the help of a few, awesome people, I started learning, little words here and there, and I did a lot of pointing, right? So even though I couldn't speak their language, I was still communicating in a way that they could understand, especially if I went to an establishment to eat. And they gave me the menu, and I'm like, I don't know how to say this, but I want this right here. And they're like, okay, cool. So it's those things. But again, even though we were in their land, we had UCMJ, but you still had their law. And UCMJ didn't override their law, because if you were out in their community and violated their rule, you were subject to their law, and UCMJ wasn't going to protect you from that. So if you went to jail over there, you went to jail over there, you stayed there, and you suffer the consequences of whatever their law mandated. So I think that's the thing. We have to realize that, number one, whoever the authority is, I'm saying that intentionally, whoever that authority is decides the law, and and that law now defines the culture.
Absolutely. I love that. But you brought up an interesting point. Since we're on a podcast, I have to ask this question. Now, in America, we say something different though. Because we're a melting pot, we say that everyone has the freedom to exercise their culture, right? But on the flip side, with what you said about going to the Rock,
Mhm.
now when they come here, we look at certain folk a certain way when they tell people speak English. You're in America, and we highlight them as bad people. But we just explained that we should go to their country and understand that they're not going to speak English because we're not in America. So how do you feel like is there a difference in the two actions?
No. Let me be clear. A lot of them do speak English. A lot of them seek to speak English because they desire to communicate. But again, even us being a melting pot culture, it doesn't change. You're still in the United States under the United States law. So even though your culture exists in the United States, your culture don't defy the laws of the United States. Even if your culture views different laws, you still have to abide by the law that's here, or you are subject to the rule and the penalties of that law. So is it a bad thing that, people who have a different native tongue speak their native tongue? No, it's not. Right. What I teach people, especially when I'm talking to captains and lieutenants, I tell them to become curious about somebody else's culture. That way you can learn. Right. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with learning somebody else's culture, but make no mistake about it. That culture is still under the laws of that land.
I love it, man. Listen, first off, let me shout out my big brother over here on my left because, man, or is it my right on the screen? But either way, this guy right here, because you killing it. You throwing gems at everything and every question tonight. So I just want to shout that out first. Secondly, um, I do apologize for not going down the list like we typically do and shouting everyone out in the chat. But I do want to shout out one person and shout out the community while we do it. Please don't hate me for jacking up your name if I do. But Shanita Burns, she put a comment in there saying thanks. Can we pull that up?
Oh,
She said thanks for making me feel welcome. That's a shout out to you. You're always welcome, always on any platform we're on. That's first off, and shout out to our community because this is what we do. We're not gatekeepers, right? We're not exclusiveness. We're open to those who are willing to hear, grow, and learn. So, a shout out to the empowering perspective community. And coach, if you got anything else on that.
no, man, I'm with you. I'm glad you said that. Again, anybody who has shown up tonight, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on LinkedIn, Instagram, or on YouTube, again, like we always say, get in the comments and let us know that you're there so that we can recognize you because we appreciate you guys being here. You could be any place else, but you chose to be here this evening, and we do not take that lightly. So thank you for everybody who was here, and thank you guys for hitting that like button, and thank you guys for sharing it on your social media platform as well.
Absolutely. With that said, let's get into this scenario real quick. I got one for y'all. All right, and y'all know me and my name, so don't judge me. All right. Tina and Mr. James are co-workers. All right. Tina believes that there should not be any restrictions on how people conversate, whether they are at work or in public. Right? So her and Mr. James would discuss all topics: politics, belief, sexuality, and even their own fires and desires. Don't judge me, just love me through, bro. So one day, Tina's working, and Mr. James is conversating with someone else, with Mr. Brown. Uh, about their own love lives and whatever. And she overhears Mr. James says, you know, and I meant to say Mr. Brown says that he believes this is a man's world. So, you know, Tina found this conversation to be inappropriate and filed a complaint against the two men. However you want to view the rest of that conversation, however you want to picture these people, right? But we got Tina, Mr. James, and Mr. Brown. All right, should feel good. So with that limit, and it's a little vague, a little bit on purpose. But with that said, my question to you: did anyone's freedom get infringe on another's in this scenario?
So freedom, no. However, however, it's not a physical constraint that was exercised. However, it could end up being a psychological restraint in the long term, based upon some of the things that they were saying. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, Rick James and Rick James and Tina Marie need to mind them out. First of all, yeah, we don't need to be talking about everything in the workplace. That's just what it is, and that's why most work coaches say that there are certain things we don't discuss. We don't discuss politics. We don't discuss religion at work because people will they will take it to the hill. So yeah, and if you know what I mean when I say the hill, yes. So in that organization, there should be, and I might be getting ahead, and if I am, I do apologize. In that organization, there should be some rules, some ethics that kind of govern behavior. There should be some policy letters out there that says the things that we do and do not do within the workplace. Talking about politics, talking about religion is definitely one of the things that is frowned upon. Sexuality, that kind of falls under the whole sexual harassment thing. Anybody here, somebody talking about a thing and they get offended, they can file a complaint. So that's one of the issues there. Now, it does not necessarily mean that Rick James offended Tina Marie, right? Tina may not have necessarily been offended, and Tina did not have to be the one to file a complaint. But Mr. Brown was probably offended. There may have been a reason behind it. It doesn't even matter. Mr. Brown was offended by some of the things that they talked about. He reported it. Now we got a problem. So when we talk about freedom, are we talking about, physical freedom? Was anybody, incarcerated because of this? No. But psychologically, there is a high probability that it could stem from there.
Absolutely. Now, of course, I kind of, freestyled this scenario, when making it. Don't ask me why, what was going through my head. But after going back and reading it, in the beginning, we created, or Tina and Rick James created their own illusion of what freedom is. So I'm not going to say freedom was infringed upon, because I do not believe, this scenario to me was supposed to highlight what freedom is not. And that's why I went this route with this statement. So freedom is not your ability to, like you said, to speak on whatever you feel like wherever you are, right? Because what my actual freedom is, my freedom should be to not have to be disturbed by inappropriate conversations, inappropriate statements. That's where my freedom now is infringed upon, is when you start talking about this, that, or the third. I heard some people at my job talking about politics when some things were going on in the country, and someone gave their opinion, and one of the people who started the conversation got offended. Well, you getting mad and you getting loud for what? How about we do each other a favor and change the conversation? They didn't like it because some of them a little older than me, but as a supervisor, I had to nip it in the butt before it escalated, right? But there, like you said, there are things in place. I'm not asking questions, okay? I know it, but I do believe that they created an idea of freedom They created their own idea of freedom, and then they wanted to infringe on each other's idea of what they thought freedom was because it offended them.
Yeah. I think sometimes that's what people do. I like what Miss Charlotte Jordan said. She said, "No, I thought Tina was okay with the open conversation. I'm with her. Like y'all over here just saying whatever it is you want to say." And then Mr. Brown said, "You know what? This is a man's world." You know what I'm saying? He's singing over there too, and you mad at him. How you
With
gonna
his
get
shirt
mad?
open and everything.
Yeah, his
Yeah.
curls and sweating and all that other. How you gonna get mad at him? And y'all over there saying whatever it is y'all talking about, probably I don't even want to get into the details of it, but I'm just saying, like you can't have it both ways. You can't have it the way that works for you and it not be a rule of thumb across the entire board when it comes down to behavior. So yeah, I'm agreeing with her on that.
Absolutely. Me as well. I think this is what happens when you think that you can exercise absolute freedom. As we said earlier, it doesn't exist. And when you try to create it, you create more confusion and chaos, as we saw in this scenario. So with that said, what rules or codes of ethics or whatever could have been in place to avoid this entire scenario?
I I think I kind of touched on some of them previously. I'm laughing at Lisa's statement.
Me too.
I think I kind of touched on someone previously, right? It depending upon the type of organization it is or what type of profession it is, there may be a code of ethics. In that code of ethics, it articulates some of the things that we can and cannot do within the organization. If there is no code of ethics, they have policy letters, SOPs, standard operating procedures, things of that nature, which also talks about behavior within the organization. Obviously, every company they have to abide by the rule of law when it comes down to sexual harassment. That's not an option, right? That is mandatory for every company, and under the policies on sexual harassment also includes sexual assault. And what we have to realize is that assault is not the same as sexual assault is not the same as regular assault, right? It can look like a harmless touch, but if there is physical contact, that constitutes assault. So when we start looking at all of these things, right, all of these policies and all of these standard operating procedures that should be in play, it should articulate what civility looks like in the organization because you are there to work. A lot of times what you'll find is that there's a lot of what we call water cooler talks. You'll take your 10-minute break and y'all congregate around the water cooler or the break room or whatever that looks like. And you'll spend 15 minutes in there talking when you was only supposed to be in like a 10-minute break. So rules will cover that as well. What does conversation look like in the pit, right? And generally we call it a pit when you have an open area where everybody has their own little cubicles. So what does good and orderly behavior looks like in the pit? Well, now, don't play your radio so loud. Don't be surfing the internet or whatever the case may be. Don't like all of those things would be in there. So when you look at the rules that govern all this, there are a lot within the organization. That's one of the reasons why every employee must go through onboarding.
Absolutely. And every organization we've ever been in, has their own set of bylaws and code of ethics all across the board. Maybe not so much on EO anymore, since some laws have changed, but I live by the rule of thumb. If we're not going to be careful ethically of what we say about people and their culture, also be willing to suffer whatever consequences come behind set statements.
Well, ideally, I would say this. I think EO has been around so long that it has now created restraints within people. So for the people who've experienced EO and have dealt with EO for 20 or more years, ideally they will have the necessary personal restraint to where they do consider people when it comes down to what they're doing and saying within the work environment. However, I do like what Maya said. She said, supposed to abide by the code of ethics, but the culture has an impact on behavior as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I like it. Listen, you may and when you say that, so for me, I'm thinking if I'm the employer, I'm thinking, does that mean now that I should have some level of understanding of the person that I hired, right? Because if I pull you from Georgia and I'm from New York, and same American culture, different regional culture in the country, right?
Sure.
And so I start a company, and I'm thinking of how we do things up north when I do my code of ethics, my bylaws, and all this other good stuff. And you come in, and you come with your southern concept, and though you may seem like yours is better than is better than mine, and I feel like mine is better than yours because culturally that's how we were brought up. I think there's an understanding that, hey, there is a culture behind who this person is, but we have to do what is necessary to adapt to the culture of the company if you want to be employed here. So I do agree that the culture sometimes steps in and it impacts behavior, sometimes unknowingly, because we just act out of habit a lot, but one thing the military did teach me was, when you're at work, when you're on the job, you have to keep yourself conscious of where you're at and what you're saying and how you're behaving, because my house and my job is not the same place. I say certain things in my house. I can't say everything that I say at home at the job.
Yeah. The reason why I like this is because I think, kind of going back to what you were saying, there were some things we learned a long time ago about certain cultures, because you know how it is. You got the law, right? You got the code of ethics in the organization, but depending upon where the organization is and what special select groups exist, there is a culture within that. And a lot of times, one of the things that we learn is that that culture was actually going against that law. And I'm gonna tell you, I come from the land of field artillery, and we have a very unique way of talking to one another. We use a lot of adjectives. We use a lot of adjectives, adverbs, and superlatives when we talk. And when I went to the NCO Academy, I had the commandant. She kind of got me together real quick because, again, my culture said I speak this particular type of way. My coworkers are 11 Bravos and things of that nature. So we spoke that type of way to one another, same type of culture. And let me tell you something. Them students were coming around the corner one day, and I gave this one. I was given the business, knife hand extended, the whole nine. And next thing you know, the commandant was standing behind me like, "Son Dwyer." I turn around, she's like, "Went over there, go to position parade rest." She's like, "Hey, don't be cussing at my student. Don't be cussing at my student." Yes, sir, Major. So it was a new thing I had to adopt, and it was the right thing, if I'm being completely transparent. Now, I'm not saying that if you use adjectives, adverbs, and superlatives that you're a bad person, but it is, and I think Maya said the same thing earlier, it's a degree of professionalism that is expected of you, especially when you're working in certain areas around certain people and things of that nature. When you're out in the field on the gun line, all kind of stuff like that, I got it. Nobody see you, right? Nobody's around you. But then even that, is that the right thing to do? Right? Because when you look at integrity, integrity is all about doing the right thing, even though even though anybody's not watching. So it's like reconditioning your mind to move out of that mindset to an adjective, adverbs, and superlatives is your way of language, transitioning into a way to where you use more professional languages that actually motivate and inspire people to act.
Absolutely. You brought up artillery. I spent my last 9-10 years in the military in artillery units, right?
That's why I like you.
That's why I tolerate you. No, stop. At this point, I love my artillery, man. Y'all are a unique set of people. I'll tell you that. There's no better way to explain them. But, I remember when I first got to 282 and they started allowing females to come in to the support roles, right? I had one female in my S1. We ended up getting a supply. a female supply, S6, you know, in the support roles, of course, that were not in the FSC. And a lot of NCOs didn't like it. Now I was young and I'm an HR guy. I came from Fort Jackson, where HR world is almost dominated by females, you know, neither good nor bad, you know, it's just, you know, but so I didn't see no difference. I showed up 6 months later, female showed up. I'm just, well, welcome to the shop. And everybody was like, well, we can't be ourselves. And but it's like you say, you know, there's this artillery culture of how they speak. And then when the female comes in, they don't want to restrain themselves. They don't want to watch what they say. They want to be able to speak and say what they've always been able to say. But like you said, when you get off that gun line and you go to right, and you go to recruiting or something or somewhere else where it's a broadening assignment, you're not in the artillery culture. You have to learn how to adapt. And that's one of the first things you learn as in NCOES is that, you know, a leader is adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that kind of goes into our segue. And man, we moving. Felt like we were moving slow, but we're moving kind of quick. But leads into our segue into our next portion, which is the social order. Right. Social order is the way a society is organized based on shared norms, values, and institutions that provide stability and predictability in social interactions. It includes the structured arrangement of relationships, laws, and social hierarchies that guide behaviors and maintains the status quo. Factors like culture, economics, and political systems all influence the establishment and maintenance of a society's social order. I said a mouthful. Right. My bad. I started reading the comments. So y'all own it in the comments. I want to put that out there. Yeah, I'm loving it. But just with reading that definition of social order, what are your thoughts?
Don't like status quo.
I knew you was gonna say that.
Oh yeah. I think socially you socially progress over time. I think that's necessary. I think as time progresses, people change. Like case in point, go back. Let's look at us as a society. Back when we were younger, talking about me, not you. But back when we were younger, right? We never knew this thing called the internet. We had Encyclopedia Britannica and things of that nature. So when you had to write a paper in school, you had to do some serious research. You had to have like 5, 6 different books you had to go through. And a lot of times they would tell you how many sources you had to have. And then next thing you know, this thing called the internet comes along. And then, you know, everybody got AOL and they're doing their little chat and all that other great stuff. Because that's really all people use AOL for, right? They may surf the internet every now and then, but most of the people did use AOL Instant Messenger. But then it grew into this big old robust beast that it is right now with AI. You cannot say based upon social order, it looks the same then as it does now. So status quo, I'm not necessarily sure I would inject that in there, but I absolutely do agree with everything else when it comes down to this definition.
Yeah, I kind of knew you was gonna go there with the status quo, for literally every reason that you just stated,
and more.
Right. We could do a whole segment on that alone. But I'm looking at and maybe because I'm thinking in an American mindset when I say this, but I think of things like culture, right? So economics and political systems. But I think of a thing like culture. When you're in a melting pot, and it goes back to what you said, when you're in a melting pot, is there a way to create a quote unquote status quo? Right?
I think so. Okay, to make sure that I answer the question, I think in some cases people seek to establish a status quo. I think people are inherently lazy. I'm just going to say it like that.
Mm.
Therefore, because they're inherently lazy, they look to find comfort zones, and they look to nestle down in their little comfort zone. Well, you can choose to come out of that if you want to, or you can allow life to happen, and life will force you out of it. So, regardless of what culture it is, whether you're in a melting pot society, whether you're in a society that's predominantly, the same, I think at some point, unless it is your culture to constantly seek growth and improvement, things of that nature, I still think a large preponderance of the population will look for complacency and get comfortable in what they consider to be the norm for them. And then at that point, they're looking to maintain that norm. They don't look for things to change. In fact, when you look at a large degree of the population, I think it's like 85% of people do not like change. So when you look at it from that perspective, yeah, I do believe it is available. It is possible, and regardless of what type of society you find yourself in.
Yeah, I want to attack that lazy part because and not attack maybe a bad word, but I think you know what I'm
Sure.
saying. Uh, I want to start by saying not all laziness is bad, right? Because I think some level of laziness has has evolved to our innovative culture in America to create to evolve things, right? Because we want to create a way to do certain things easier, right? Um, Creating the vacuum cleaner for your carpet to make it easier for you to clean it. I don't know if anybody ever been poor like me and didn't have a vacuum cleaner growing up. You were you sitting there with that straw broom trying to get them little tiny specks of dirt out of the carpet. You know, the vacuum cleaner created something easier. Now I'm a little more lazier when it comes to my carpet cleaning. I'm not sweeping no carpet. All right. So I think things like that. I see you. I saw your face.
Yeah, I don't see that as lazy. Um, it's just because there is a more efficient way to do a thing that does not necessarily define lazy. When I say lazy, I am talking about from the standpoint of choosing to do nothing when there is the opportunity to do something. If that vacuum cleaner is there and you choose to vacuum your floor, that's not the definition of lazy because you don't have to sweep the floor anymore, right? But you can still choose to sweep that floor if you want to. That's your choice, right? But it's like saying, okay, well, I'm lazy because I choose to do research on the computer as opposed to reading books, getting a whole bunch of books and doing the research by the books. Well, it's not lazy, right? That's actually utilizing the tools that I actually have to the best of to my advantage in that moment. So when I say lazy, that's not what I'm making reference to. In fact, the example of the computer is an example of innovation that moved us out of a particular status quo. Because now a lot of people, everybody doesn't have a computer. I get that. But it's like going to the library, and I think his divine appointment said it, like the Dewey Decimal System. For those of you who actually know what that means, right? Going and using the Dewey Decimal System to go find a book and bring that book down because you're not checking all these books out. You're going to look at the book and see which book you need to check out, and then those are the books. So doing those things like that was a necessity when you needed to do some research. But now you ain't got to really do all that. You go to the internet, go Google some stuff and then go research this, and you can search to the bottom of the internet if you want to find what it is you're looking for. I just don't see that as being lazy. I think that it's just using the resources that you have at your ability.
Now I agree with that. I was talking more of the thought that led to the creation of the thing,
Sure.
right? Because you used the term, and if I'm misquoting you or misheard, of course, correct me. But I'm thinking of the statement you made when you talked about, lazy and desiring comfort. the desiring comfort and not wanting to be hot in my house in the summertime. Maybe there's a way for me to cool my house when it's hot outside.
Right.
And so now now it creates this thought that goes into one day becoming the air conditioning system.
Sure.
So that's what I'm talking about when I say now I don't think all laziness or comfort, I should have used that word,
Sure.
but I'm coming from the way I thought I heard you define laziness at that point for that point.
Right.
Wasn't all bad because some of it led to the innovations that we have today.
Sure.
As
being comfortable and comfort zone is not the same thing, right? Trust me, I'm all about being comfortable. But I'm all about challenging myself to get out of my comfort zone as well.
Right.
Those two things can be true at the same time.
Right. Because I had an encyclopedia, but thanks be to the Most High. When I got to high school, I also had a Google search engine.
Just by virtue of saying I had an encyclopedia, and this conversation's over, bro. I ain't want to do it no more.
I had a whole set.
I
my daddy did, and he used to. Now, when I was younger, before I had to actually do research for school, my father used to make us look up stuff. We'll start talking about things. He said, "What do you know about that? If you think you know about that, go prove it."
Yeah.
So he made us. That was his way of kind of making us read, and we would go read the encyclopedia. That's part of the reason why I hated reading when I got older, because them encyclopedias was not for the weak, especially once Google came about. But if you still choose to read the encyclopedia, more power to you.
I ain't saying nothing though.
She said it. I ain't say it. For those who read, nah. It's all love, sis. So there's a statement I came across in reading and doing some research on this topic. And the statement was that individuals will willingly surrender some of their unlimited natural freedom to a sovereign power in exchange for the protection of their remaining civil freedom. Do you agree with that statement?
If the word willingly wasn't there, sure. Okay. It's like you being born and raised in an area. I don't think you're willingly surrendering nothing. It is what it is, right? You live there, you abide by the rules. You move to another country and you become a citizen over there. You ain't got to become a citizen yet.
Just got to be in the borders of that country.
On the land. You are now subject to their rules. I wouldn't even say willingly, because I think that kind of gives the wrong connotation about the power that individuals have. I don't think individuals have that unlimited natural freedom that exists. I think where there is sovereignty, there is also protection, if you will, especially for those who are citizens or under their sovereign control. That's kind of like what that looks like. So ideally, as a United States citizen, we are under the power of the United States, right? And inherently, we have a degree of protection that exists because of that. You go to Great Britain, they actually have a true sovereign, right? They have a king. And so now, and for those who are citizens of Great Britain, they are under their sovereign control and protection. That's what sovereign does. It provides and protects those two things. So I think with this statement, I think the issue that I have here is willingly. And at the end of the day, I mean, surrender. No, it's your way of life. You abide in it.
Yeah, I have a problem with maybe the parts that you said is why, but I have a problem with the statement because I don't agree that is willing or it's true surrender. If so, I think the surrendering is survival. Is the survival instinct. I live under the Constitution, right, of the United States. That's what I'm governed under, and so I live under that that the ordinances that are written within the Constitution, because I don't want to suffer the consequences, such as going to prison.
Sure.
But if this was an automatic thing, like individuals willingly, right? It's kind of like this is what we all do. If that was true, I do not believe that we would have prisons. Prisons exist because people do not willingly surrender. Some people have to be forced or beaten under submission, if you would say. And I believe that to be true, even when we speaking of the scriptures,
Sure.
right? Paul says that you were dead in your trespasses and sin, but it was God who quickened you. You had to be quickened before you could surrender under his sovereign power. Before then, you were under your own will, which we know that the imaginations of man is evil continually. This is what so when I look at that, I think that it's survival. So man's necessity to be physically free from punishment causes his surrender or to surrender some of his unlimited, I don't know what's limited or not, natural freedom to his sovereign power in exchange for the protection of their remaining freedom. Now, even if we were a group of people that came into a circle together, I don't even think that it's a sovereign power thing. I think it's we want this thing to work smoothly and to move smoothly, so we create some bylaws, some rules to govern how we operate while we work on this project, or while we research this thing, or while we start this business. We create these rules just for ourselves, but I don't know if I would call them sovereign, because I think that rules that we make, that man make, are subject to amendment.
Sure. But even with that, those rules that we make are still under the rules of the higher authority. Even in that person that violates one law and ends up getting, going to prison or whatever, or beaten into submission, whatever that looks like, that's one law. But what about all the other ones that they abided by and adhered to before they violated that one? So I think from the holistic perspective of this statement, that's one of the reasons why I have an issue with it. The holistic perspective of this statement kind of views man as being independently free. And it's like them going to a sovereign and say, I will surrender my total freedom for the sake of your protection. No, that never happened. Right. They were born under a particular thing, and that sovereign's that sovereignty became a way of life for them. That protection became a way of life. And in a lot of cases, if I'm being transparent, a lot of cases we become kind of spoiled by it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can kind of see it in the way that we operate as a people today. We've evolved to, and I'm glad you used the word spoiled, because we're an entitled generation, I think, as a people, right? I know we all are different generations. You're X, I'm millennial, there's Z, A, whatever the case may be. But as a generation of living people in this country today, we are entitled, and we don't understand that some of the quote unquote freedoms are privileges under the law here. And I say that because we absolutely have all learned about the times before we were born where some of these quote unquote freedoms didn't exist for certain people.
Mm-hmm.
So they can absolutely make a law to strip set freedom. So the entitlement under it is wild to me, but to hold each other accountable to the extent of it is a different thing.
Yeah.
So next question, under this, and I think we kind of touched on a little bit of some of it, but is it what freedoms do you believe some would surrender?
It's like another part of this question is missing.
It
Like-
is it's the second question, I think. But go ahead.
Like I'm trying to, because it's like, to me it feels incomplete. Like, what freedoms do you believe some would surrender if
According to the statement, it said that some would surrender some of their freedoms for their civil freedoms.
Well, see, it kind of goes back to the way I answered the original question, right?
Mhm.
I don't believe that there is a place where, like, and I'm just going to use this term, y'all don't come for me. Like, a free man would go to a sovereign and say, I'm willing to give up some of my freedom for your protection, right? Like, a sovereign doesn't negotiate with something lower than him. Like, a sovereign negotiates with a sovereign. That's kind of like how I'm looking at it. So, and maybe I'm wrong, or maybe you might have to usher me down the right direction. And that's probably like why I'm struggling with this. So it's like, I don't know. To
me, it could be true.
Yeah.
To me, it could be true if you think. So I start thinking, because I always equate things back to scripturally, like my sister does. When we think of a covenant, right? The Most High is the sovereign.
Sure.
His people are not.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the idea that the sovereign brings himself to the level of the people to create the covenant to govern. You get what I'm saying? So yes, he's sovereign. He's not negotiate. It's not that he negotiates. He meets the people where they are to create the covenant with them for both to abide by. Because even if we're honest, even the Most High abides by his covenant.
Sure.
If you do, I will.
Sure.
And if you don't do, I will. And he abides by his portion of the covenant. So I'm looking at it like that, but he is still sovereign.
So when you go back, let me give myself some room here. When you go back to your early childhood years, your parents were given instruction.
I knew you was going to do this. I knew you was going to go there.
You left me no choice. You left me no choice, right? Your parents were given instructions. And if we're being completely honest, within the scope of those instructions were implied tasks. Unfortunately, in this melting pot society, we bypass the implied tasks, but we'll talk about that part later.
Right.
The scripture says, Father, do not provoke your children to wrath, but raise them up in the ways that they should go. So when they get old, they do not depart from it. There's the key. When they get old, they do not depart from it. So now, what is happening in your younger years? You are being taught the constraints. The constraints are giving you your left and right limits as a younger person. Then as those constraints become a way of life, they ideally should become second nature to you. So even if you do violate those constraints, you automatically have the awareness of like, man, I shouldn't have done this. I did this, or whatever the case may be, right? And then you make that transition, and that transition now transitions into who you are to be. So you're supposed to be the character development, the person who actually embodies those constraints, but instead of constraints, now there are restraints, right? So now you're becoming that person that exercises restraints, and you're still governed by the law of the sovereign, but you don't necessarily have to go around reminding myself what it is. No, because it's already embedded in you psychologically, because you've studied it and your parents taught it, and so forth and so on. So now, in that regard, with the sovereign coming down, he came down because of the iniquities and transgressions of man, not because he was negotiating. He came down to save him. So now, in that regard, right? Because this is not me saying that anything you said is wrong, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So in that regard, what you have is that man still did not negotiate freedom with the most. Didn't negotiate surrender with the Most High. they accepted the gift that he gave them and made available to them.
So what if I flip it this way? Because you cheating now, so I got to go in my.
You started this.
Let me open this drawer and pull something out of here, see what I get. Because you. So I do not disagree, but let's look at it in a different set, right? And I'm gonna do it both ways. I'm gonna do it as government, and I'm gonna do it as being governed spiritually by the Most High, right? So just work with me for 10 seconds.
All right.
I'm on an island by myself. Well, not by myself, but I'm on an island to where I have absolute ownership of my space, my property, my stuff. There are other people on the island that I believe are more savage-like. So they continue. When I build stuff, they take it. When I make food, they steal it. And it's them versus me. So I have no fight. I need protection. So I look over. I'm not negotiating the standards or the SOP. Thank you, Lisa, for using that term. Right? Don't move the goalpost. Now I ain't moving the goalpost. I'm just re-explaining the goalpost. Right?
So, I'm listening for it. Don't worry about it.
Listen, y'all can't be haters all your life, right? Let me be great. So I come to the United States and I say, I will fall under your sovereignty. I will fall under your sovereignty, which is your constitution, and abide by the rules and the law. I want you to protect my property. You can actually claim my island now as a territory of the United States for your protection. Places such as Puerto Rico has done so, right? Some places didn't ask for it, but still got it, like Hawaii. But everybody's story is different. So by virtue of being a territory or a state, handing over that authority to this sovereign power, right? America, because we know we don't have a sovereign ruler, but the Constitution is supposed to be sovereign, right? Sure. In this state, I now fall under the protections. I can call someone. I got funded now to create a police force that will come and protect. I can now apply for the insurances that exist in this government that will pay me back what I lost due to set acts. So I look at it in the same sense spiritually, right? I'm living in my own anarchy and in my own dead space, right? Because we get the part of being dead, all right? And because I need his protection from what's coming, I surrendered to him. I didn't negotiate with him. He didn't change his laws. He didn't change his standards. But what the negotiation was is that now I give me to you, and you protect as you promised. I fall under, because now I fall under your ruleship. I fall under those blessings that comes with it. Does that make sense?
It would make sense outside of the example I gave, meaning that this child was not raised in a house that was taught according to the scriptures. So for a child who was raised up and they never heard of the Bible, their parents never did anything of that nature, that would make perfect sense. I just don't believe a majority of people exist. I think a majority, especially our culture, I think a majority of us were raised in a house. Now, I'm not saying that even though we're raised in a house, we were taught the law, statutes, and commandments. A lot of us was taught church. That's a whole nother conversation, right? I ain't gonna touch that tonight because we ain't got time, right? A lot of us are taught church. So what ends up happening that a lot of adults ended up having to go back so that they can digest and process the law, statutes, and commandments, so that now they understand what it is like. And when they understand what it is like, it's like, okay, got it. So even in the surrender, to your point, I think there was an aspect of that savage that you talked about that they had to get out of their system, and then life whooped up on them enough. People kept stealing their stuff, right? So I'm working with you here. People kept stealing their stuff. They got tired of all of that. And then they was like, okay, I'm tired. I'll accept the gift that you had offered a long time ago but I was, as people like to say, I was quote unquote running from it. It's always been available, right? But it didn't really cost me quote unquote a thing. It was always there. Now the relationship development piece begins moving forward. So I get that. I'm with you. And I think somebody said that there is no constitution. Well, I think the Bible itself is a constitution, if we really think about it. The Bible itself is the constitution of the Most High. Therefore, now that governs how we're supposed to behave, how it governs how we're supposed to treat one another, that governs the way that we exist in this earth. And if we really pay close attention, that constitution supersedes any other constitution that we have in this world. Therefore, whatever their constitution is saying, it should fit right under it. And so just kind of like what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. I get what you're saying, and I'm not rejecting it. I'm saying for that in my mind to fit, it has to be to a person who never was taught anything about the Bible growing up. And unfortunately, some of us fall in that category.
Okay. I don't think we disagree. I just think we have different ways of getting to it. Because I look at it, even because I believe that we can be taught of the scriptures and not take in what was taught of the scriptures.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
It does.
But kind of like what you said too, a lot of us in return, a lot of us were taught church more than we were taught the oracles of the Most High God. So that is definitely true.
Yeah.
So we're gonna, man, I said it felt like we were moving slow and then it sped up on me. So we're gonna move into the last portion, and then I'll ask the question number 3 under this topic, which is the tension of freedom. Now, the tension of freedom is the idea that the individual freedoms of others should be limited for the protection of others, and the combatant idea that the safety of others is their responsibility and should not infringe on others' individual freedom. Felt like that was a mouthful, but it is below. Go ahead and read it as it follows through. Before I get into that question, is there any takeaways or add-ons that you have?
I think just to sum it up, when we look at the tension of freedom, it is like a negotiation between the desire of personal autonomy and kind of like civil collaboration, if you will. That's kind of like the best way I can sum it up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think when we get to the point of finding collaboration, there's natural tension there anyway. Just by the nature of, we're not all the same. We all see things differently. So coming together, and trying to create this unity comes with some level of tension,
Mm-hmm.
even with the laws in place, because sometimes it's the interpretation of said laws that causes the tension or the indifference. You don't agree?
No. It's not that I don't agree. I was shaking my head no to a question that was asked.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not the same.
No. Now that's a whew. You stepping into something right there, sis. I like where you're going now. I see where you're going with that. So my question, as we get into the end of this, towards the end of this conversation, is there a set of laws that are just and allow for individual freedoms to exist at the same time?
The easy button is yes. The laws in the Bible. That's the easy button. When we start talking civil law, I want to say yes as well. Now, does that mean every last one of them are? No. I think you and I had a conversation at some particular point in time. And I think I asked a question. I think it was one Saturday during Bible study. I asked you guys, and it was a rhetorical question, just one for you guys to think. Is there a point in time where a law is unjust, right? And the answer is yes. And when a law itself becomes unjust, it is when it's the law itself, that particular law, does not necessarily contribute to natural order, civility, and service. That's the thing that we have to look at. So, is there a set of laws that are just? Yes, and allow for individual freedoms to exist at the same time? Yes and no on that part, because your individual freedom in that arena now becomes a collective freedom. So if the law itself does what it is supposed to do, and ideally it creates collective freedom, not individual freedom, right? So now what does that really mean? Well, the reason why the law exists is so that you can get along with one another. That creates a collectivism. Now that gets to the negotiation for autonomy within the realm of constraints, because the constraints that exist are so that you do not violate or trespass or commit an offense as it pertains to individuals, their property, and so forth and so on. So that's kind of like how I look at it. I love this question, but that's why I had to break it down into parts, because the first part, is there a set of laws that is just? Yes. And allow for individual freedom? No, at the individual freedom, because the law exists so that we can have collective freedom.
Right, right. I was trying as you were speaking, because I agree with you, but I was trying to think, because a lot of this, what we do, we research and we put these questions together based upon the information that we receive. But I'm thinking, of what's the idea of individual freedom. I think the idea was probably what you described as collective freedom, but me as an individual, I partake as myself in this freedom that we collectively have. We
Sure.
all have the right and the freedom to do this. We all have the right and the freedom to do this, but individually, I get to actually participate.
Sure.
And so that's I may be wrong on how I'm seeing it
No,
when I was
I
looking into
don't.
this individual freedom.
I don't think how you articulated it was wrong. I think the participation piece leads to the collective piece.
Right.
I think we are wrong when we look at freedom as an individual thing for me to capitalize me, myself, and I, and it does not include anybody else. That's why when you go back and look at the notion of slavery, that's why slavery is such an abomination, because at the end of the day, it made a group of people, whatever aspect of slavery you want to talk about, it makes a group of people enslaved to another group of people, and it gave these groups of people rights over these group of people. But at the end of the day, it does not actually conform to the overarching law of all laws, right? And
Right.
so now when you look at these inalienable rights that was given by God to all mankind, now you have to look at the laws up under that, and does the laws up under that identify those inalienable rights? And now you have to get to the point of understanding why those inalienable rights exist, for the sake of collaboration, working together, colonization, right? And that's a whole nother conversation within itself.
Right. Right. I mean, I concur. There's no other way. I agree. My answer to this question was actually a scripture, and which is the same answer you gave, right? But it was 1 John 5, 1-3. He says, John says, "Whosoever believeth that Jesus is the Messiah is born of God, and everyone that loveth him, that be that begat loveth him also that is begotten of him." Right. But this we know, that we love the children of God when we love God and keep his commandments. For For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. So I look at it. I look at it right there. It's not grievous. It's not burdensome. So one translation says. So when I look at it in that aspect, that this set of his commandments, his laws, his statutes are in place not to burden us, is in place to free us as a collective. And I like that you say as a collective, because it frees us in a way that we live as a collective.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at, and one of the laws that I love always referring to when I talk about this is when he starts talking about the poor. You know, I know we see Christ talks about the poor and tells us the poor will be with us always, but Leviticus tells us that when we go to reap our harvest, that we should leave the edges, so that those who are traveling in that, the poor, can come and grab freely and grab willingly. They have the right to eat like I have the right to eat. And it is written in his laws to make sure that my right to eat don't infringe on theirs. I don't hoard so much that I begin to waste. And that's the kind of the culture that we live in today, is that we live in such gluttony that we take in more than we can actually than we can actually consume. And go on, today was trash day. If I had gone out there last night and dug through people's trash, I would have found all kind of spoiled food, all kind of leftovers that never got touched, because the gluttony is our mindset. So but he put it in his law so that collectively no one goes hungry.
Right.
Ain't that something? So to me, that's just.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any alibi, sir?
Well, man, there's nothing you can add to the scripture. You know what I'm saying? The scripture speaks for itself. That's why I keep saying the Bible is the best commentator of the Bible. It's I mean, like you said, it was the scripture itself was the antithesis of everything I said previously. Not that I'm highlighting what I'm said after the scripture has been read. The scripture has been read. Let that be it, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm agreeing. I just think that we have to get to the point to where we got to get out of this self-centered way of existing, right? I think too many times we do that. Within the scope of this self-centered way of existing, you look to be good. Mine's, but you're not considering anybody else. But yet, as long as everything is working good for me, as long as nothing is working against what I got going on, that's kind of like what I said previously. We find our little comfort zone and we try to nestle down in there. No, if you found a place to be quote unquote comfort, who can you be helping now? You know what I'm saying? I think that's a huge piece. So I don't want to keep going on, because I know you gotta get ready to go check on your son.
Oh yeah, he texted me 5 minutes ago, said it's halftime. I got time. No, I'm saying, but I agree. Like you said, there's nothing else to add. With that said, we're gonna go into our final thought from our coach, and then we're gonna close out tonight.
I think the notion of the freedom paradox is an interesting one. Understanding what a paradox really means, and then looking at the aspect of freedom as it go along with it. And I think when we look at it from that perspective, it can kind of help us in achieving more. Like I said, an example of a paradox is less is more. So what's the concept behind less is more? Well, it's like, I can have a whole bunch of stuff, or I can streamline the stuff that I actually have. And now when I get down to the stuff that I'm actually using, now I can be more functioning with that stuff. So it's like, where in your life are you really hoarding stuff, right? Whether it's a bunch of junk you got all around your house, a bunch of junk in your garage. And y'all know how y'all do, man. Y'all have a garage that looks like a storage shed, right? What can you give away to somebody that's usable for them that you haven't touched in months? Go look in your closet, right? How many clothes you got in that closet that you ain't had on, since 2 years ago or whatever the case may be? Who can you get? Take that stuff and give it away to somebody else. I think when you look at the another paradox, I think we can realize something that goes along the lines of what I'm talking about. Give, and it will be given unto you, right? It's almost like if you want to receive, then you need to learn to practice to give. I think a lot of times we don't do a good job at giving because we are hoarders, like it was previously heard. So get in the habit of giving stuff. Get in the habit of getting rid of some of those clothes. Get rid of some of those shoes. Get rid of some of the stuff that you have just sitting around that you haven't touched in a long time. I bet you that when you start doing so, you'll start receiving more. Don't eliminate time for that. If you got time to sit around and lay on the couch and watch TV all day for 3 straight days, what could you have been doing? Could you have been helping? Could you have been serving somebody else? Right? I think all of those things come into bear. So I think that's kind of like where I'm gonna land, right? Again, find where you are hoarding, whether it's time, resources, whatever, and then find somebody else, an entity, an organization to where you can give to them and then watch the magic happen.
And we thank you. We thank you for everything, man. Chat, y'all were on fire. Y'all were on fire. I swear I wish we had more time because it was so much that was being put out there. If you are, if you're listening in and you're on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you at, listen, go read the chats, engage in it because they're putting out gems. We want to hear we want to read everyone's comments and everyone's thoughts in this conversation. And I think that to me, that's the best part of being in this community because it's a collaborative of thoughts. And then we reason these thoughts together with the word of the Most High, and we come to a conclusion of the matter, right? So I thank you, Coach, for, of course, allowing us to host and do the work, and then, of course, for conversation with me this evening. I enjoyed it. Listen, go ahead and follow the channel if you haven't. Go ahead and like the video if you haven't already. Did you have a QR code to put up to?
I did, but I'm looking for something else. Really, I'm looking for the information about Saturday's meeting. We got a meeting tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So for all you guys who are in the community, if you can afford to give us an hour, we'll have our quarterly meeting. And again, that's 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will send out an email, and that email will actually have the link and everything to it. That way, there it is. That way, everybody will actually have access to it. Again, come on out 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We just talk about what we want to do for the next quarter. It's going to be some webinars and stuff like that coming up. A couple of keynotes. I think you guys will enjoy it. Also, Sunday morning at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, we on TikTok. I think it's you this week, is it?
It should be Roland.
Roland, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. So yeah, Roland is going to be leading TikTok live. So again, 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, Sunday morning. And I think that's pretty much all of the notes that I have. Yeah, and Crystal's email address, just in case y'all got questions. Yeah, there you go. If you don't get the email early enough, just shoot her email and she'll make sure that you have it. Yep, I forgot about Bible study. Bible study at 10 a.m. as well. Just a lot,
Sunday.
a lot on Sunday. 10 a.m. on Sunday, Bible study, right there.
Yeah, go ahead and scan that QR code, man. As you can see, we don't stay busy to be busy. We stay busy because there's so much to give and so much to receive. And we love serving in this community, each other and whoever joins in. We love the service. So thank y'all. Y'all have a great rest of y'all evening. Listen, don't let them goblins and gargoyles outside, disturb your peace tonight. Eat your rest, turn your lights off, ignore your doorbell. If you're giving out candy, all grace be to the Most High. But as as for me in my house, I will be serving my peace in my sleep tonight. So yeah, y'all go ahead and enjoy your evening, and keep yourself available for your family and your loved ones.